Here are the solutions for the day 4 bell work. Solve this quadratic equation using the specified method. So we're going to solve this equation 3 different ways. We should get the same answer every time. One method to solve a quadratic equation is called factoring. This works when you have a 0 on the right side, and notice that we do already have a 0 on the right. We want to factor this trinomial, so it factors with 2 sets of parentheses. X times x is your x squared, and now we need 2 numbers that multiply to negative 12. We have some choices, 3 times 4, 2 times 6, 1 times 12. We want to pick numbers so that the middle term turns out to be positive 4. That can be done with positive 6 times negative 2. Those 2 numbers multiply to negative 12, and the outer and inner product combine to 4x. Now use the zero product property to solve for x. If these 2 factors multiply together and the answer is 0, that means that one of those factors must be 0. The x plus 6 has to be equal to 0, or the x minus 2 has to be equal to 0. In the first case, x would be negative 6. And in the second case, x would be positive 2. So we have 2 different values for x that if you substituted them in, the final answer would turn out to be 0. In your Algebra 2 class, your teacher probably wanted you to write this work step down right here before giving the final 2 answers. In pre-calculus, you don't have to do that. Just take a look at this format right here, and by inspection, figure out what number for x would make this be 0, and what number for x right here would make this be 0. Now we're going to use a process called completing the square. When solving a quadratic equation by completing the square, you want to leave the x squared and the x terms on the left side of the equals and put the constant term on the right side of the equals. So you can do that by adding the 12 to make it move to the right. Another thing you should do is leave a blank spot right in here to input a number that you are going to figure out. Here's how you get that number. Take half of the coefficient of x. Half of 4 is 2. And then square it. 2 squared is 4. We're going to put a positive 4 in that blank spot. But because you can't just put plus 4 on one side of an equation without changing the value, you need to compensate by putting plus 4 on the right side as well. As long as you add 4 to both sides, you haven't really changed the equation. The reason this is called completing the square is because we just created a perfect square trinomial, which we can factor. Perfect square trinomials factor with one set of parentheses squared. Inside here it's x plus 2. The square root of x squared is your x. The square root of the 4 is the 2. On the right hand side, 12 plus 4 is 16. Now we can solve by taking a square root, because taking a square root removes squaring. So we have x plus 2 is equal to the positive and negative square root of 16. Remember, the square root of 16 is 4. So this is really positive or negative 4. And we're almost done. We almost have x alone. Now let's subtract 2 from both sides to get the x alone. Positive 4 subtract 2 would make an answer of 2. Negative 4 subtract 2 makes an answer of negative 6. And observe that those are the same answers that we got using the factoring method. Okay, let's do this one more time, this time using the quadratic formula. When you have a quadratic equation that has equals to 0, then this math formula can be used to get the answer. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Using this method assumes that you know how to find values for a, b, and c. In a quadratic equation that's in standard form, the leading coefficient is the a. In this case, it's a 1. The coefficient of x is a b. In this case, it's positive 4. And the constant term is the c. In this case, it's negative 12. It's not just 12. It's negative 12. We're going to substitute those 3 numbers into this formula. So right here it says negative b. This means the opposite of b. If b is 4, then we have negative 4. Now, inside the square root symbol, this part of the formula talks about b squared. So if b is 4, then b squared is 16. For the letter A, substitute 1. For the letter C, substitute negative 12. This is all divided by, with a really long division bar, 2 times A. Well, if A is 1, then 2A makes 2. Now let's continue on and work inside of the square root symbol. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 12 makes 48. And 16 plus 48 makes 64. And this is all over 2. But the square root of 64 makes 8. And again, this is still all over 2. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 makes 2. Negative 4 subtract 8 is negative 12, and negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. So, no surprise, we got the same 2 answers as we did with our other 2 methods. Now you can see right away that the fastest method is factoring, but factoring only works if the trinomial factors. You can see that the next fastest method is probably completing the square. But completing the square only works out nice if the coefficient of x is an even number, so that when you take half of it, you don't get a fraction. If this had been an odd number, the process would still work, but we would have got fractions, which makes the work harder. The quadratic formula is a good way to solve if you're really good at filling numbers in place of variables.